executive session and are now returning back to regular session. So I believe the next item on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. So if you all join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for those of you watching at home, everybody who's present here at our meeting has indicated that being socially distanced as we are comfortable with not having our masks on for the meeting this evening. So if you see us without masks in the video later on, that is why we're taking those off. Our next item on the agenda is our approval of our February 25th board minutes. Board minutes approval. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And this is actually also including our March.
Several.
Those go through
Yeah.
from February through the first meeting in May.
That's right. So we have several meetings worth of minutes here to approve. I have a motion from Ms. Yingling. Do I have a second? Okay. Any discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Apache?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 6, next item on our agenda is our superintendent's presentation.
All right. Thank you, board, and thank you, team, for helping make sure we have the presentation prepared for tonight. I'd like to walk everybody through our 4-phased plan and give an update on where we are today. We've been in this plan for about 7 to 8 weeks now, and so it's a good time for us to publicly give a quick update. So I'm going to run through what we've been up to and then what our next steps are so everyone can hear that from us. And the 4-phase plan, again, just as a reminder, is our charting a path back to school in the fall and what that looks like. We have 2 key factors during this pandemic that we are paying close attention to. The first is we want to return with the ability to maintain a safe, inclusive, and healthy learning environment for our staff, students, and community members. So that is something that is number 1 priority. And number 2 is that we are always going to be monitoring COVID-19 in our community. The prevalence of that is going to change based on numbers, and we'll continue to monitor that. And the numbers, as they change and as that changes in our community, it may change how our model is playing out and how we're working that out and implementing that. And we've built that into our model and our structure that we'll talk about today. Remember, there are 4 phases to this. Phase 1, again, started about 7 or 8 weeks ago as we were ending the school year together. Our charting a path forward is always including our community voice. And so we do community conversations. We've termed that as community sourcing, where we bring our community together. And we've had parents, we've had students, we've had staff members, business partners, other superintendents weigh in on how this is going. So you can see what phase 1 is, investigation and learning. Phase 2, ideation, prototyping. Phase 3, which just ended, is a planning and communication. Actually, we're just in that phase now. So phase 2 ended, we went into phase 3, and eventually, right around July, we'll go into phase 4. Phase 1, a quick recap of phase 1, starting back around May 11th, we released a public video to our community sharing what the phases were going to be about. And we collected data. And we collected data in the forms of focus groups, conversations, interviews with, again, staff, students, and families. And we also had survey data. So you can see in our survey data here, when we asked the question about returning to school. So if buildings were open, and this was again about back in May, we had about 3,600 responses, I think, 3,300 responses. And you can see about 58, almost 60% of our folks responded that they would return to the buildings and like to return to the buildings. About 28% just unsure at the time. And I'm looking at these numbers from afar, so if I'm getting those wrong, it's because of my eyesight, not because the numbers are wrong on your screen. And you can see the other data that we collected during that time. This is not all of the data, but it's a snapshot of some of the data that was very helpful as we moved into the next phase. In that data collection in phase 1, we also asked questions with our students about how much time they were spending in remote learning. If you remember, we ended fourth quarter in remote learning, so we wanted to learn from that experience. And by asking those questions, it helped us to understand how we can continue to improve that as we move into the fall. So when the opportunity comes up that we may have remote learning opportunities in the fall, we wanted to know how we could continue to improve that. We also asked our teachers the same question. If they had if there's a preference out there, we had 762 responses, where would they be if there was just a choice going into the fall? Again, this was back in May as we were in the school year, and you can see where the data fell on that. That some said, 100% remote would be great for me for various reasons. 50% would be in person, and then 33% would be a mix of that in person and online. Some key findings that we gathered from our experience as we were going through this is basically it's so important for us to have a safe return. So that was number one. So we want to make sure that our plan included safety considerations. We also wanted to make sure that there was choice involved because we understand everyone's story is different, every situation is different, and so we wanted to try to include choice in there to give families choice and staff choice. The majority did want to come back to school, as you saw the data, and be in person. That is the majority would like to do that. There are some challenges when you're having staff do both online learning and in-person learning simultaneously at the exact same time. When we have that, that is difficult. So we're trying to build a model that is not doing that concurrently at the same time. We also recognize relationships are key to everything we do here at Mason City Schools. And then we knew that there would be importance of that synchronous learning, which means basically the teacher and the student are in the same space at the same time, whether that's through a screen if they're doing remote learning or online learning, but also in person as well. Phase 2, we started the ideation and the prototyping process around June 2nd. We released a video with an update introducing this. This concept basically was engaging again in focus groups and surveying and showing some different models. So when we first went through the feedback sessions in the first phase, we showed about 6 different models to our community and said, out of these 6 models, what are pieces or ingredients that you like from these 6 models? As we came back from those different approaches, this is the model that we built. This was kind of our first draft model. You can see green, meaning our first option was to come back to school, but we also understood and we understand that we will have both students and staff and family that may not be ready to come back to school for various health reasons or concerns. And so we always had the choice built in of remote learning 2.0. That's what we were calling it at the time. That is adjusted, and I'll talk a little bit about the adjustment we made to that. But basically, we were giving choice, whether you were coming back in person or an online version. We also had this yellow area. This yellow area, we spent a lot of time with our families talking about this and with our staff. The yellow area was called option B. Basically, if we were given some requirement, if the state was requiring all schools to be at 50% capacity, or the local health department, which we work with on a daily basis, said something to the effect that we feel more comfortable with you being at 50% capacity, then we would look at this yellow blended approach. And we would look at a couple options there. One where students would be at home 3 days a week and in person 2 days a week for full days. We also looked at a half-day model, which would be 5 days a week and build some consistency. And so you can see those demonstrated here in the slide. So by region 1, we're meaning students would come from a similar region or regions of our district so that we would have whole families together in session. So if you were in region 1, for example, you would be learning from home on Tuesday and on Thursday, and also again on Monday for some enrichment courses. And then you would be in person on that Wednesday and Friday in this model. So that was one model we were looking at. We also looked at something that was called a half-day model. We brought students in for about 2.5 hours in the morning, had a break in the middle of the day for some teacher plan time and lunch and some cleaning, and then we brought the second half of their classroom in the second portion of this. We do have videos that I believe are going to be attached to this presentation. If you want to see those more in depth, you can watch the videos, and I go in depth on what each of those models mean. And so those models for right now, we're placing those on hold. They're They're ready for us. We've worked through a lot of the logistics, but we're placing those on hold for just a second because of some of the other feedback and considerations that we've had to consider. So during this process, we've had well over 40 focus groups, and again, that was included in phase 1 and phase 2 of this process, where we asked them about the challenges they saw in each of these models, but also asked about the solutions. And we did that through Zoom and Google Meet formats to do those meetings. Then through that process, we did find some key findings, and those key findings included some challenges to both of those options in the yellow that you heard me reference earlier. Some of the challenge, probably the number one challenge we received right away, was that it was very challenging for us to maintain what we would consider Mason quality. And when I say Mason quality, I mean not just the academic quality of the content and the learning experience, but the whole experience that you have at Mason City Schools, whether it's the after-school enrichment activities, whether it's the sports, whether it's any of those pieces that make Mason quality and what makes us a destination district. So that's the number one thing we heard right away, because when you move to this alternative day process or the half day, you begin to give up, and it limits some of the things that we're able to do. So some of the offerings that we would have for students would be limited or not able to provide for them, and because of some of the stresses that would cause our system, and we just don't have the staff to do all of that. So we're not saying this is a no forever, but we are saying that we're holding the yellow or that blended model on hold for right now in case we do get placed into a situation where our local health department would say we need to be at 50% capacity. Some of the challenges that we also face are the changing landscape ahead of us. As you know, because you all that are watching this possibly have the same experience, that you see the world around us changing so quickly. We get new guidance, and Warren County Health Department has been amazing. They have worked with us closely. Our county district superintendents have worked closely on a weekly basis. I work with the health department about daily right now. They receive information and different guidance from the state level and also from the CDC that's constantly evolving as we learn more as we're going through this pandemic. And so that is one challenge that we're constantly facing, is the constant change. And so as things change, our model has to adjust. And so if you were a part of our process at any given time, you probably saw that from phase 1 of our process, it moved from 6 different approaches to 1 approach. And then in about the middle of our phase 2, it moved to 2 approaches. And that's based on some of the things that are changing in our landscape. The state and national school leaders are in a collaboration. I'm fortunate enough to have a group of state leaders that I'm on a call with several times a week. Today, 40 superintendents across the state get on a call weekly to just talk about how we're approaching this, both from a logistics but also from a high quality experience. When we're looking at keeping kids at home compared to having kids in school, there are risks involved in both of those decisions. And so we're trying as leaders to make decisions that are best for the whole community, for our economy health, for our students that are at home, and looking at that holistically. And then we also have information that we're supposed to be receiving from the state of Ohio. Was supposed to come out back around, I think it was June 1st, originally promised that was going to come out. And then it was supposed to come out last Thursday, more information about the responsible restart from the state level for our schools. And then we're hearing that we were going to get it today. We did not receive that information today, so maybe we'll receive it in the future. But it'll be interesting to see how our plan locally, as we continue to develop that plan as a community, will what that will look like. Because I think what we're doing as a community is hopefully setting a trend, and that will help other districts in the state make decisions in the future. So you can see this new model. So you can see it's simplified just a little bit. And it's simplified not because the logistics are too hard in one of the yellow forms. It's just this is a more agile approach. When everything is changing in front of us, the landscape is changing, this approach actually continues to honor many of the things that I mentioned in the slide about our key findings and the feedback, but it also makes it agile enough that we can make decisions. So you'll see here in the green, essentially it means we're bringing people back in person. We would like to welcome people back. As we did our most current feedback, you'll see that in a minute, but we had approximately 70% or so of our folks say that they are they would like to sign up for green if that was an option to bring our students back as safely as possible. We also understand in that option 1 that there is a possibility, good possibility, that things will change. And if they change, or let's say we get into flu season and they decide that it would be best for schools to take a couple weeks where we're not meeting in person, this model allows us to adjust quickly and be agile and move into what we're calling remote learning 2.0. So you heard me reference that we've changed that terminology. Remote learning 2.0 is different than online learning. So I want to be clear about that right from the front. The online learning is where we are looking at the highest quality online platform that we are able to afford responsibly and that we are able to facilitate responsibly for our 7th through 12th grade. And that's what this option 2 will be. So if a family decides, hey, I don't think option 1 is for us, for whatever reason that might be, they can select to go into option 2 when we make that available to them. We're hoping to make that choice available to them in the next couple weeks. July 1st is kind of our deadline that we've given ourselves. So we're hoping to be able to get that out to folks so that we can begin to collect the data. Because the data, if you select option 2, let's say 50% of our district selected option 2, that helps us make decisions that are responsible with our staffing, which is really important. So again, option 1, come back in person green with the opportunity that we might roll into remote learning. Remember, remote learning is where you stay with that teacher. And that experience looks a little different. It's where the teacher's checking in. There's asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities, and you're connecting with them and with your class and staying with them. Option 2 means you're selecting to go to an online platform where you will have a Mason teacher helping facilitate and lead you along the way and checking in with you, but you will have an online platform that we're looking at. We're evaluating. We're down to, I think, 2 selections. Amy Brennan and her team have done an amazing job evaluating these different platforms, and so we're going to pick the one that fits best and as close as possible to the Mason quality experience that we would like to provide. You would also be selecting to be into that option 2 model for a semester at a time. Again, that helps us with staffing. It's not that we don't want to be flexible, it's that we need to make sure we can staff that appropriately and staff option 1 appropriately. So we would ask that you would select that option for a semester at a time. Phase 3, as I said, we've moved into this. June 16th, we moved into this. We had a video that was released to tell people about what we're doing and where we are. And so we released a lot of that information in a video, and we're also starting to communicate with folks by asking them, if these were the options available, which one would you choose? So you saw us send a lot of information out in an email to all of our families, and we've posted this as well. But you can see, I won't read all of this to you, but you can go back through this, and if you have any questions at all when you read through this, please let us know. The information that's being shared with you in the slides here, whether it's the adjust to daily student schedules and limit student movement, or whatever slide that you may be looking at if you have questions about these were developed in coordination with our local Warren County Health Department experts and our superintendents from Warren County. So we got together over the last few weeks, and because we didn't have any specific guidance outside of our local decision-making, we went ahead and put some of this guidance together in concert with our local health experts. And so this is where we cannot eliminate every risk, as you can see here, but we also are weighing out all of the risk involved, whether people are at home or here. And so we're trying to make the best decisions that we can. The data that we did collect, like I said last week, when we put the information out to our families, this is what has come back so far. So about 50% of our students are represented in this survey collection. You can see that MECC, for example, all the way on the left of your graph, the green represents families that have selected they want to be in school, and then families that have selected they want to be at home learning online would be the blue. So you can see what that looks like for each of our schools. And then we have further graphs here to break that information down. So you can see if you look at a district view, there's about 80% that would like to be in school as soon as we can with the safety precautions that we're able to do responsibly and the logistics that are practical. And then about 20% would like to be online. And so you can see that breakdown as you go through the slides. We've broken that down per building so you can see what that looks like. This is not the official final choice, obviously, for families. We did this think of it as a proactive planning measure. This was our upstream approach to making sure that we are ahead of the game in planning, because there are so many decisions that happen during the summer for a school district that we are already feeling behind that timeline right now, because typically we would have a lot of the decisions in order. Obviously, we're in a pandemic, so it's a little different, but we need this information in order for us to plan staffing, to make sure that we have the right staff and the appropriate amount of staff, but also the materials, and we can also evaluate the cost that it will cost to purchase the appropriate amount of online seats for the online program that we're looking at. So that's why we're asking the questions now. It's planning. And eventually, hopefully in July, as we move into phase 4, we will begin asking for people to sign up and to register for which option meets their family need best. We know that it won't be perfect for any 100% of our folks, but we also know that we're going to do our very best, as we always do as a school district, to involve our community, that they have voice in this process, but we also need to make decisions, and so those decisions are based on the data that we're going to receive, hopefully from our families soon. Next steps, you can see we'll finalize the online learning options by June 30th, so we'll know which option is available, so you can look at that yourself and evaluate that as a family and see what that looks like, so you can make an informed decision. We'll also be reviewing state guidance anticipated coming in July 1st to see if there's anything new that would be helpful for us as we move forward. Published financial impact, so we'll also share there's going to be a financial impact to any of the decisions that we make, and because we're watching our finances closely, because we just had a major cut from the state. If you were all paying attention right at the end of the year, when this all hit, we went to remote learning. We also lost $2.1 million out of our state funds, which was approximately 6% of our total state funds, and I think 36% at the time at the end of the year, if I'm looking at my treasurer, because I know he's got the details, but that's, I think, where we landed. And then you can also see that we'll have families register their children for which learning option fits their needs best, and also register for transportation so that we can make choices for our transportation by July 15th. So those are next steps. Obviously, we'll continue to come out with other updates, but we thought it was important to update the board as well as anyone that might be tuning in that can see. Any questions from any of the board members on anything I went through too quickly, or questions that you might anticipate others would be helpful for them to hear?
Jonathan, I just want to say, appreciate so much the work you and your team have put into getting this plan to where it is today. We've obviously got a little more insight than the, rundown that you just gave, and so for those watching at home, we've had the benefit of letting this soak in, and kind of had time to sit with it and chew through it a little bit more. But I wanted to just circle back to a point you made and extend our appreciation to the Warren County Health Department, as well as our elected leaders in Warren County that have been in tune with, these issues from a legislative standpoint, and how, this is all going to play out with, Columbus and our General Assembly, and how they're going to address some of these problems. And also from a health standpoint, and listening to, Governor DeWine and, the Ohio Department of Health and their guidance, as well as the CDC. If you could kind of take a step back and just walk through again, what the room looks like when we're making these decisions hand in hand with, our health leaders and our experts in Warren County in particular.
Yeah, so good question. So we have, as I mentioned, I'm on a call almost every day. I probably miss one day a week with our health department, because we have that question that pops up, and we want to make sure that we're making decisions in concert with where our health department is. So we have a team there that I have a point person that when I call, and then they'll run, whether it's a communication. So if we're sending a communication out to our families, we'll run that by them to make sure that it's approved with the information that they know, because they have a weekly call with the state level Department of Health, so they're getting that information. I'm then talking with them on a daily basis and getting any other information. So that's how that looks with our local health department. In terms of other local leaders, we have a weekly meeting where we're sitting down and basically sharing. A lot of times it's me taking our model that we've heard from all of our families and getting feedback, and I take that model and put that before them and say, what feedback do you have for us as other leaders in our community? What kind of feedback do you have? So we've met with, like I've mentioned, business partners in our community. We've heard from P&G, Centos, different groups. I've also met with Westchester Hospital officials to just say, hey, do you see anything in here that's major concerning to you? And so are there practices that we're not using that you would suggest using? So all of our partners out there have been really great about leaning in and helping us. And it's daily. I mean, it's a daily rhythm that we're going through this. And then we have a rhythm of communication with our own leaders in our district. So I bring that information back. I know when Amy's meeting with other curriculum leaders that are in our local region, sharing information about, well, if we're going to do an online version, what is that looking like in your district? What's looking like here? So we have a high quality experience for all of our kids that choose that.
And I won't put her on blast, but she's here just about every night, so it is, when she's not here, it jumps out at me. But I know Maria Miller and, our MEA representation has been a part of this conversation as well on a,
Yeah.
regular basis. And
Absolutely. Teachers have been a crucial part of this. So teachers have actually been a part of, Amy and I did, I don't know how many sessions with our teachers, but several sessions with our teachers specifically to get their input, but then also other staff members. We did several Zoom calls where people were able to join us to a Zoom call to hear where we are in the model, but then to give us feedback. And so most of our executive team and principals have hosted those meetings now. And so our teachers have been a critical part of all this. And Maria, we talk to Maria on a regular basis as well, and she gives us feedback on what sounds like it's going to align, or if she's getting pushback. She even led some of our sessions out there with teachers, which was super helpful because she was able to get different perspectives and give that feedback. And so Maria and I met just to go through all that. So some of the reason we moved from one model, because I showed you that we had a model and then we kind of adjusted the model, and then we had two approaches that showed up in that yellow section of the presentation. Part of the reason we went to that second approach in that yellow is because the conversations with Maria and that she had with teachers, it looked like that half-day model might be more appropriate for some of our teachers. And so that's when we started to open that back up as an opportunity for our families as well.
the only other thing I was going to add is not a question, but just a encouragement to anybody who has not been able to answer that survey yet. Obviously, we want to get as much feedback as we can. We want to hear from all of our stakeholders, all of our parents in the district. You've gotten a sense, you've gotten a preview for, what's in the box right now and what the feedback has been. But it's definitely important that we hear from everybody. So to anybody who's out there watching hasn't gotten the chance to provide their feedback on that survey yet, please do. And if you haven't gotten it, obviously reach out to us, and we'll put you in touch with who you need to be.
Absolutely.
Charles,
Yep.
I want to echo your point about me working with teachers, but also all the different groups that you met with. I just want to thank you for continuing those conversations and tapping into the relationships that you've built with the community over the past couple of years, and the space that you've created where people feel confident that when they share their perspectives, that it's taken into account and taken to heart, and this is living that out. So we appreciate that very much. And would you mind speaking to kind of, you put the kind of the guiding principles about what, the principles that guided your work about how we get to next year's approach. Can you speak a little bit about risk and about, because I think one thing that I struggle with is that I want to make sure that our community understands that we can't avoid all risk. The only way to avoid all risk is to not do anything and just do remote learning, period. And even that has risk because humans are going to have to come into contact with other humans. So can you just speak a little bit about, how you kind of, not the intricacies, but just kind of how that guides your conversation about, weighing risk and knowing that the best thing is to come back to school if we can do it safely. Yeah,
it's a great point. And the conversation you're bringing up, Matt, is one that we wrestle with all the time. And this is a conversation we wrestled with well before COVID-19. I mean, the idea of we are always working to eliminate risk to the best of our abilities, whether it's school safety in general, and we've looked at that over the last couple of years significantly and invested in that. As we look at the pandemic and we look at next year, we completely understand that there's going to be risks that we cannot. It's just like when people make a decision to go to Kroger and shop, they're choosing a certain level of risk, but they also know that they need to get food to eat. And so there's there's decisions that have to be made. We know it's important for our students to be back in our classrooms with our teachers as soon as we can do that in the most safe way that we can. If we were to eliminate all risk, we would never come out of our homes. We would not come to school. That would cause a whole nother layer of risk. So when we look at risk, we're looking at mental health. It's been a big conversation in this whole process. We're looking at the health of our economy, and we know families need to go back to work, but they also need to know that their child is in a safe place and learning, and that would be school for a majority of our families. So those are things that we consider. We also know that students need those relationships as well, and we know that students are meeting out there now. I see them out there in our community now, and they're figuring that out. I don't think that it's an act of carelessness. I think people are starting to learn how to do that appropriately in cohorts of different kids. And so I think there's going to be levels of safety that we are going to do our best to implement here, which will be different than the past, whether it's, hey, when you're riding the bus, we would love for you to consider wearing a mask at this time, because we know that's a place we really will be really close together if we have two on a seat, and the protection of our drivers. So just being thoughtful and caring for others. So if you go back to our culture guide, caring for others is one of the things that we're hoping to do, but saying that you're going to come in and sit all day with that is not a realistic piece for us to say. So those are the things we're trying to weigh that out. And obviously, I've never led a district through a pandemic, because no one has that's alive right now. So anyone watching this that thinks that they have it all figured out, no one has it all figured out. And so that's why we're leaning on our community, leaning on our board, leaning on experts that we have available to us, and trying to make logical, smart, wise decisions that really help the whole community and look at all the risk. But yeah, so I appreciate you bringing that up, but that is something we wrestle with constantly. And that may change. As we learn more, we do better. So the more we learn, the better we do. And I think if you go back to the beginning of when we started this, if we all think back to the first announcement, when I was sitting in the office with my team, watching on our screen the governor, and he announced, we're closing school. I remember all of us looking at each other and saying, whoa, this is happening. And we had to make our very first, most difficult decision, and that was to stop a concert that was a second grade concert over at MECC. And my daughter, that was her concert that she had been looking forward to for the whole 2 weeks, had her whole dress picked out and everything, and we made that decision, close it down, because it was the right decision at the time with the information we had. Well, if you fast forward to what we know now, we know more, and we've seen more, and we have more data, so the risk becomes more defined, I think, over time. Thanks. Any other questions or clarifications that we could provide?
I would just quickly add that no matter what topic we've dealt with over the years, there's always a very articulate advocate on one side and an articulate advocate on the other side. And it's no different here. Probably the biggest question I've ever had during my time on the board is the last few weeks, are we going back or not? And I appreciate the fact that you've crafted a plan that has a base plan that we're going back. But a lot of what we see that's different is built around what our alternatives are should we face them. And I think what we're also learning as we've developed that is that those alternatives are also within our realm of choice to select. And while we respect our government around us, and we certainly understand everybody has challenges and difficulties, what we've learned in this process is very, very, I think it's very safe to say that not many people really know what really high quality guidance really is. And so I appreciate that you've been a leader in creating our own destiny. We've talked about local control all the time. Now it's time to step up and demonstrate it, and I'm glad we're doing it. We'll do it safely, and we'll respect both sides of those articulate arguments, and I think we'll make it through together. So I appreciate the work that you've done, the collaboration, the work years ahead to build relationships so that when times like this arise, you can lean on those and find win-win solutions. And I appreciate developing a team and a staff that's capable of navigating through this kind of complexity. And let's do it and do it well and do it together.
good. And Kevin, you pointed something out. I think it's so important for people to remember that we will have people on both extremes and their feelings on whether going back to school or not going back to school. And I think you said it well, respecting that, recognizing it, and being kind to people in both of those camps, and understand that it may not be the camp that you fall into, but we will make a decision holistically as a community to do what we believe is best and safe for everybody. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Anything else from anyone?
Jonathan, I just really appreciate all the work that you're doing is ultimately in the end for our families who support us and make all of this possible. Their input and allowing them to plan, I think, is something that a lot of people that I've spoken with are very grateful to you and your staff, your entire team. And I just feel like that is worth mentioning several times to you and your team. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you pointing out. So I will give all the credit. It's this team in here. They have done an amazing job. Like we pushed our leaders really hard all the way up until the last couple weeks to come up with a plan proactively. So I give a lot of credit to our team. I tell them often that I would not want to lead through a pandemic with any other team. So I really appreciate the work that they do.
Well, your leadership is preparing a
They
team
put
of
up with me,
leaders.
which is
and
good.
it's being noticed, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, thank you. And again, if anyone has questions about that's watching this, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to meet with you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Our next item on the agenda is the hearing of the public. And seeing none tonight, we will move on. Item number 8, resolutions. This is a bond anticipation note renewal. Before we get into this a little bit, do I have a motion?
Second.
And for discussion, Sean, would you mind talking a little bit about this resolution?
Sure, there's actually 3 total resolutions on the agenda tonight. One is the bond anticipation note resolution. So there's some of our district debt is in long-term bonds, and some of our district debt is in short-term notes. Now, this section is actually in short-term notes, and so we renew this every 12 months. And so this will come up in August for renewal. We'll renew at current market rates, and that's what this resolution allows us to do. The second 2 resolutions are our appropriation resolutions. One for fiscal year 20. It's our final version for fiscal year 20. The second one is our first or temporary resolution for fiscal year 21. Both of these things are part of our compliance with Ohio budgetary laws and with our audit requirements, and so we will approve these and submit these to the county auditor. Both of these, and the one for fiscal year 20 again is our final. The one for fiscal year 21 allows us to start processing bills and payroll July 1st for next fiscal year.
Thanks, Sean. Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, Sean, just in the spirit of, we've talked a little bit about, after the levy, as we, enter this new levy cycle, right? We're in a new levy cycle, really. I mean, we're not collecting, it's not a place to be, we've passed it, and we're gonna talk about, having the conversations that we had more top of mind than we did in the past, right? So in that spirit, would you mind speaking to a little bit about how the bond anticipation note fits into the story that we were telling a few months ago? This is a part of it. This is right in that story.
Sure, absolutely. So the bond anticipation note, again, this is the temporary portion of our debt, and so we know this year what our bond millage is. It was an effective millage of rate of 7.9 mils, and so using that, the collections we have from that allows us to pay this note down a little bit. So currently we're at around a principal balance of around $13.5 million. We're going to pay that down by a little over $6 million in August, and the rest of that we will renew in a note and carry it forward next year. Next year at this time, again, collecting a similar millage rate for next calendar year, we'll come close to or potentially pay off that bond anticipation note next year, which basically means that 2 years forward, our bond millage will drop. And so this, as part of the story we had, like you said, that we had told through the levy process, was that in collection year 2022, we would see a drop of 5.25 mils. And so this is just the next step in the process of moving towards that pay down. And so we are still on track to do that, and we will still see that 5.25 mil drop in 2022.
So these are essentially the mortgage mortgages that we said that we would be paying off on the bond issues that will come off, we'll stop having to collect on those, and that's when the second phase of the levy will kick in and
Right.
replace that.
Yep. So when these notes are paid off in 2021, that's what will allow us to we'll no longer have payments on these in 2022, and that's what's allowing us to drop that millage. Sure.
Any other discussion?
So proud.
I will just note, I know the second two resolutions on here are kind of a housekeeping matter. We do these every year, and we, get ready as we turn the calendar over into our new academic year. The bond anticipation note resolution is a unique one for us to do, and it speaks to our past boards and leadership that have put us in this position to be able to make a fiscally responsible decision for our taxpayers. So kudos to those of you who have put us in this position. And with that, Sean, would you call the roll?
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Vachi?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 9, administrative personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
Second?
Any discussion?
The only discussion on this item is, we have Carol that is leaving transportation and going into that retirement. We're also extending a little bit of her contract, so there's some overlap. So there's a 1-month training overlap for Mark, who was approved at our last meeting. Mrzanowski, who's going to be taking over that position. So that's what is showing up here. That's what we're trying to get in order. And this is a unique year to be taking that over, but it's a good opportunity to learn something new with our new structure.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Vachi? Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 10, non-district funded positions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Vachi? Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 11, certified personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Just remind you on B, the appointment there for B. Miller, that is, if you remember last year, we asked Gina Fox to step out of her role to take an interim position for the special ed supervisor role that she's in, and then we asked Jody Bergman to step out of her role to go into an interim director role. The plan was that was a 1-year thing that we were asking them to do. We did talk through that with both of them and asked them to stay on another year in that. We did not feel like this was the best time for us to do a full interview process and start that whole process right in the middle of a pandemic, because it was a kind of a unique, they have done an excellent job. They have great relationships with our families, and so we thank them. But this is a reflection of we're just filling those positions, but holding them in those interim roles for 1 more year, and then we'll reevaluate closer to January, February on what we're going to do with those roles.
And Jeff filled that position.
And just filling Gina's position as an intervention specialist. So,
But he
all
did
that
already
said,
this year. He was already in that.
this year.
Yeah.
So he's coming back. He's got relationships built with our folks as well.
Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Vachi? 5-0.
Item number 12, contracted personnel, independent contracts. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a reminder how grateful we are for the diversity we do have here. 75 different languages spoken, interpreted, so we do need a lot of support there. So that's just, you'll see that almost on every agenda that we're trying to make sure we have the right interpreters in place.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other discussion? Sean?
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Vachi? Mr. Galvin?
Yes. Item number 13, classified personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion? Any discussion?
We do have a status change in there, that's Kim Ashman. Kim Ashman has been an amazing teammate of Debbie Darling's, and so she'll be actually stepping into that role and fulfilling that role. And we'll continue to evaluate our needs of central office to support her in that work. So that's, you'll see that reflected under 13A.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 14, certified personnel additional duties. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 15, classified personnel additional duties. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion?
All the items on 16, I won't go through every one of them. Several of these are at the end of.
Still 15.
We're on 15, yep.
Nope, no comments.
Sean?
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 16, action items, superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anybody have anything to discuss on this one?
Superintendent might.
There are a lot of things on this one to discuss, but I'll go through just briefly on this. I apologize, I was scrolling ahead. Every year with Hamilton County, so when you see HCESC, that's Hamilton County ESC, we start our contracts, or we set up our contracts in the spring for the next year. So a lot of that is in this, and you'll see that whether it's, we have a person that oversees the autism scholarship. Instead of hiring someone to do that, we actually have that as a service because it's less, it's more cost effective for us to do that as a large district. So you'll see those. You'll also see the Warren County agreement. Warren County agreements typically, you can go through each of these in detail, but it supports some of the services we have for students with special needs, and so there are services that they provide for us, whether it's here at the school, but also on other facilities, and you'll see some of that show up in the agreement. The approval of curriculum materials that we continually probably have shared with you at some point in time in the first reading and second reading. There's also information on here. There's access to a part of our property. It's not actually, it's not Splash's property, it's just named after, so people see that clearly. I don't think that's your property, that is just named after.
It's your property.
It's our, as a district property. And then you'll see some agreements there with a custodial agreement that we have set up with Alpha Omega. They've done some nice work, and their work has led to further that contract, and so Todd has worked with them to negotiate that and get that to a place where we feel good and comfortable moving forward with. And then there's some other details on here. I don't know, we have some roofing details that we're doing on a roof. We're not doing the whole roof, but we're patching some pieces that need patched. You'll see that on item K. I think those are, any questions about any of these? I know I'm just referring to them manually. There's a lot there, but it is spring, so this is a lot of things that show up typically in spring.
Not questions so much. I will commend Sean on subject, the letter M, property casualty insurance renewal. We got a chance to meet in Finance Committee, and Sean, I appreciate your working with our agent and kind of seeing what's out there as far as we reevaluate, you know, the property and casualty insurance premiums that we're paying, and exploring what the market is like, and you know, just trying to make sure that we are not just in autopilot, especially this, you know, with the economy and the funding being what they are presently. It's always good to test the market a little bit and make sure we're getting appropriate coverage and being good stewards.
Appreciate the help of USI, our brokerage agency. They did take us out to about 10 different companies this year. We got several bids back and looked at different deductible amounts, and and kind of settled on this option as our best option, so appreciate them taking us through that process.
I'd just add on that one, you know, when you get in this role, however long you're in it, you're peeling back the onion, you don't realize you're just starting to peel it back, and I just appreciate, it's not an area I really went in depth into until Sean got here, and appreciate the depth and the diligence that we go through. It's important to have our insurance set right, and I, you know, it's a very complicated landscape, and it's full of surprises out there that are disappointing as a elected official, and would be disappointed, you know, by citizens to look at how kind of complicated to navigate that is. But appreciate it, Sean, taking us through it. It's important. We've seen claims that we've had to make, and it's important we have things set up right. And I think we have a good setup here, and very pleased.
Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Apache?
Yes.
5-0.
Item number 17, Treasurer's Report. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
A couple of things to point out on here. A lot of these are kind of the monthly rhythm of work approvals that we go through. However, a couple of things are specific to our year-end processes. Again, part of our budgetary compliance and fiscal year closeout. If you look, a couple of the ones that point out, item G is our amended certificate of resources. That's just the revenue version of that appropriation resolution we were looking at earlier. The appropriations are on the expense side. The amended certificate is on the revenue side. It's the same thing there. We will approve that and submit that to the county auditor and use that in our fiscal year and audit. Item H, we have a new fund. Again, we've spoke in depth about the OFCC construction process we've been through over the last few years. A lot of good decisions that were made there to save the district and taxpayers a lot of money. This is just part of the process there. Again, part of the compliance and requirements of being in that project. So where we set up a separate fund to continue to do maintenance on those buildings, in addition to the permanent improvement fund that we have now. And just one item of note, that there's no separate levy for this fund. Again, something else good to point out is that, and part of the planning that's been done over the last 20 years, this fund is actually typically in a district, if they don't have a PI fund, your community is having to pass a $500,000 maintenance levy to maintain the buildings. But with the planning that was done here, we do have a PI fund. So basically, the funds required for this new fund are coming from the existing PI fund that we have. So there's no new tax levy required for this maintenance fund. One other thing to point out in the donations section, again, we appreciate the work of Casey Moran and her team with the comment cupboard. We see several donations from community members in there, and the work that they've been doing even through the pandemic to help support some of our students and families in need. And then also, one that we don't see a lot, we see several families contributing to the Child Nutrition Office Benevolence Fund, but that one is obviously, as you can imagine, in light of the abrupt end of the in-person school year, we had several families who had balances on their students' lunch account funds, and so they were given the option to either receive a refund of those dollars, or they could contribute those back to a benevolence fund in the Child Nutrition Department to be used for other students in need in future years. So that's basically what this is. We appreciate those families contributing to that.
That's a neat, I'll have to see if I think I probably had a balance and I didn't get the email. Well, I'll look into that because I think.
Thanks, Sean.
You might be surprised.
That I got an email.
No, that you have a balance.
Well,
Yeah, I've seen your twins.
I've had to explain to them you can't buy 2 lunches enough.
Yeah, right.
I had it set up that it can't go below $5. So I should have at least.
One for him, one for him, and her. I'll take one of everything.
Proactively sent it to seniors, but I'm sure you know, you for graduates, but they would love it if you would do that.
All right, any other discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Wise?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Apache?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
5-0.
All right. Item number 18, committee reports. It looks like, did we have a facilities committee meeting on June 9th?
We certainly did. And I guess the hot topic is all the work that we'd like to get done with some of our facilities and the budget constraints that we're trying to very wisely stay within. And Todd and his team have done a really good job of going around the district and evaluating what needs to be done now, what can wait, how can we get more life out of what is there, or purchase something that will give us additional value. One of the difficulties is a lot of our buildings, they have a lot of square footage, and although some of them have several stories, there's a lot of roof to cover. And we have some issues at the high school building right now where it's kind of an architectural issue, the way the water runs off, and you can hop in on this whenever you'd like, Todd, if you want to add to it.
That was actually part of Pod C tonight, was 3/4 of that roof. Last year, we had part of the eave done. And then over the learning commons, there's 2 dormers up there, and it's a 212 pitch, so that water, it doesn't roll off as fast. Of course, we've gotten 21 years out of it, so can't complain about that either. So some repair work will be done on that as well.
That 21 years went
That's right.
by real fast.
Fast.
Another issue is the custodial staffing that Todd and his team have to be aware of. We had George Highfill and Jerry Pennington at the meeting, and they're an invaluable asset to this district. But the work that our custodians have had to do in the face of our new normal with the virus, having kids not be in school for several months did not mean that there was no one in the buildings and there wasn't work to do. So although some of our staff was laid off and was not in the buildings, our custodial team still had to get all the disinfecting, all the cleaning done for what activities, limited activities that were going on in the buildings to keep the people who were here safe and allow them to get the work done. It's really been a challenge, but I think with what Todd and George and Jerry have put together, they're going to have the buildings actually ready with all of the typical summer work, maintenance, waxing of floors that has to happen. It's just been a huge job, and to be quite honest, I'm not sure how you have gotten all of that done.
We have a good team.
Well due. Our appreciation is absolutely well due. There's another factor that Todd and his team is having to balance out, and that is our maintenance agreements to protect the buildings and the equipment that is in them. And again, with a lot of roofing and a lot of square footage, you've got a lot of HVAC. So the question becomes, what is the wisest purchase of filters for the equipment to protect it and make it last as long as possible, but not necessarily buy the Cadillac of every air filter or whatever maintenance item needs to be placed on the equipment. And again, it's a fantastic job. It's a big job that I think if you don't work in that field, or you don't have the luxury of hearing these committee reports and see the work in the committee, it's tough to have a full appreciation of that. And really what it amounts to is you're protecting the taxpayers' investment in the school district and in our families and our students' futures.
Well, and at that meeting, I think we talked about what was the overall asset just for HVAC, and it is about $40 million to replace. So when we're looking at preventative maintenance at $250,000 compared to a $40 million asset, you can see it's necessary.
Absolutely. And the partners that we've had through the years are continuing to support us. Train is a great partner, and they've been in place for many, many years here in the district. So I think that's worth noting as well. But Jonathan or Todd, do you have anything else to add? Feel free. Kevin, I know you missed the meeting. You might have some questions or want to enhance. Okay.
Thanks, Connie. Safe and Inviting Schools Committee? We have one of those on,
We did, and actually, Mr. Cooper presented to everyone there. It actually turned out to be a really good meeting. That's where we found out we received about $20,000 or $30,000 worth of PPE that we didn't have to pay for. We didn't even know was coming, so.
So, yeah, during that meeting, Todd set up a group of, it's obviously a good partnership with our county and folks, and we brought a sample, show and tell, but we had asked, because we're hearing that masks, there's different kinds of masks, right? So we made sure we had one of these for all of our staff members. It's kind of a mask that Todd and his team secured with Centos. So that
Correct.
was early on. Districts around the county did that. We obviously have plenty of these disposables, but we also knew these were becoming more important because you could see your whole face in this, and so see facial expression. And so as we're looking at teaching, we want to make sure we're driving, making sure we had some of that opportunity as well. So this is a model right now that we were able to work with the county and receive, I think, how many?
1,500 of those
these
shields.
that they secured on our behalf based on some of the money that they received. So we would not have done that if we didn't have that relationship and that meeting set up on a regular basis. They knew that we would be interested, and so it's nice that we can give our teachers and our faculty some different options that they can choose, and each one has its pros and cons. This one's great, but you can have a nice surround sound.
And
you can see your whole face and your facial expression, and you can breathe.
you get the air conditioning too, up close and personal with your breath there.
That's right. A little bit more of that. So, thanks Todd for setting that up, and we did do a presentation. With that group, we shared our entire plan, and we asked them to look through a safety lens to give us feedback on our plan. So that's kind of how that meeting went.
Great. Mason Schools Foundation.
Yeah, we, the board met on, I guess it was just last Wednesday. And it's, like every other organization, they're looking at the next year and kind of thinking through how they can support what's happening in the district and what does their programming look like. We had a finance report from Marcia Wise, and they adopted the budget for the coming year. And I haven't been able to go to many meetings, and we've interacted with them a lot, but Connie, you can probably attest to this, that it's just exciting to see them work and see, just see their enthusiasm for what they do and what we do as a district and how they can support our teachers and what they do in the classroom. And the gala is the big event, kind of the big in-person fundraising event. And I think it's no secret that we're not going to be able to do an in-person gala in the fall, which is pretty disappointing but understandable. But it's going to be so much fun, and it's going to be really neat because they were talking about all sorts of ideas to have. To foster a sense of community and have it be a moment. We talk about moments all the time. But to create a moment that may have a way of opening it up as a moment to more of the district than just the people who might physically be present for the gala, anyway. So look for that. I think we'll definitely be reaching out to everybody in this room, and there might be opportunities to host parties and do on-site things and have a videotape. It's going to be really exciting. And also, I'm really proud because not unexpected, not surprisingly, knowing that we had some vendors that we work with, like the Manor House. It's a big hit to not have an event there, but they've been a great partner to the district and the Schools Foundation, so many community efforts over the years, and so we'll be working with them, and so kind of figuring that out together. It's going to be really exciting. So look for that and more information to come. But then talking about the finance side, they're committed to continuing to do what they do to support learning in the classroom and our teachers' innovative ideas. And so, they recognize that this year's going to look a little different from a fundraising perspective, but they're committed to giving the same amount in grants next year as they would have despite a pandemic. And that it just shows a really great partnership. It shows the amount of planning and forward planning to be in a position where they can do that financially and the support of the community for sure. And so they're currently right now reviewing the grants that were submitted by our teachers and thinking through what they might be able to provide and approve, and they're committed to continuing this year to go help us go above and beyond. So it's going to be exciting to see what comes out of that and what they do this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Finance Committee.
We hit a lot of them, two topics.
Tonight's meeting was kind of
Yeah,
brought to you by it.
that's right. We talked property and casualty, got an update on that process, the diligence and the quotes that we were looking at in terms of the options, so that was on the agenda tonight. And then, in addition to the bond anticipation notes that were on the agenda, we looked at our overall amortization schedule with the rest of our debt. And, you know, if you've ever created an amortization schedule for your own house and you have to scroll page after page after page, it's really nice to see like that much left. We're within a decade of being debt-free in this district, and that is, you know, it's going to create so many opportunities for generations to come that would otherwise be burdened with kind of unplanned and unmanaged debt that, you know, overhangs a lot of organizations. So really proud of that. I think then once we get through 21, we'll have a nice drop down, and then we have a path for the rest of the decade to finish that off. So hope to be part of that celebration. But it's nice to see it within range, and appreciate the careful looking at that all the time so that we stay on track. So those are the two topics.
Thanks, Kevin. Legislative update.
Yeah, there are two bills worth noting, and the first one many people have probably heard about. It's House Bill 164. House Bill 164 was signed into law, I believe it was June 19th, and that is the education bill that has all kinds of information in there. There's information in there about teacher assignments and licensure. There's online bus certification. There's end-of-course exam guidance for students that were finishing their end-of-course exam, and what grade do they get on that. So there's lots of different things in there. Third grade guarantee. So if you're not familiar with that and you want to go through that, we have all the details. But House Bill 164, we want to thank our legislators for passing that, because it gives a lot of flexibility during a pandemic to schools to continue to do the work that we need to do, and not strap us to some of the former rules that were in place that sometimes we don't always agree with some of those in the first place, but they are allowing us as local districts to make some of those decisions appropriately. So that's what House Bill 164 has already passed. The other bill to pay attention to is Senate Bill 320. So Senate Bill 320 is being proposed by Senator Huffman. And that bill, I talked to Senator Wilson, our representative, today about that bill. He's supporting that bill. It's Senate Bill 320. The idea behind that bill, the spirit behind it, is to give local control to local districts and local health departments to make decisions to move forward next year with what is appropriate for that community. So instead of making a one-size-fits-all across the entire state, they're giving some local control to have counties work together with their local leaders, and what does it look like to return to school. So that is, I know caucus tonight, there's meetings tomorrow morning at 8:30, there's meetings tomorrow at 1:30. You can probably catch some of those if you go to the Ohio channel. You can watch those if you're excited to watch the Senate hearings, but they'll be talking about those 1:30 tomorrow, I think, is when that will become a bigger deal. But yeah, so lots of good things there. Just want to always give a thank you to our local legislators for the work that they do, because they continue to advocate on our behalf, and to have a senator reach out to me twice today just to tell me, here's what I'm doing, here's what we're doing for you, does this sound good? That's a great thing to have a senator that's looking out for us like that. So just thank you to our representatives for the work that they're doing. But that's tomorrow. That's Senate Bill 320. Pay attention and see what happens.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Item number 20, administrator commentary.
I don't think we have anything specific tonight.
All right. And then that brings us to item number 21, board commentary. Desiree?
I just briefly wanted to share our community and our school district's frustration with the unknown, and thank Jonathan and his team for coming up with plans. And it's so difficult for schools or businesses. You're always planning for the what if, and there's so many what ifs that we're dealing with right now. And I know we're getting a lot of feedback from the community, which is wonderful. And there's a lot of plans in place and a lot of work being done behind the scenes. So we are prepared to go back to school. So I know I've, received a lot of feedback just from friends and neighbors, and the frustration of, are we going back to school in time? What's it gonna look like? Are we gonna be at school? And that work's being done, and, just be patient, and that information will be shared soon. And our team has worked really hard, and I feel like our district is really prepared, probably more than a lot of other districts at this point in time. And we'll all be shining when we get back to school with our plan, and we're gonna be as strong as we ever were.
Thanks, Desiree. Matt?
Yeah, briefly along those lines, I just want to say how grateful we are for our staff and our administrators. This being the education setting, most everybody on the administrative team were teachers at some point. You are still teachers. Teachers are planners. Teachers think not just a year ahead, maybe a couple years ahead. And all of this has thrown all of that out the window for the most part. And you're constantly in meetings where you have a hard time even thinking through what your questions might be, because you don't even know what the questions are, because until you get a set of information, how do you even know how to think through that? So I just know that for all of our staff's brains, it's really tough, and you're doing it with grace, and it's inspiring, and we're proud of you, and we appreciate how difficult it is, and how late it is right now to have so many unknowns, and we just, we're here, we appreciate you, we support you, and we understand, and we're thankful that you're there to do it. And then I did want to say that I think it's been a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to say this is a little bit more, maybe me as just a sort of a citizen in this community. I just wanted to say how proud I am to be a citizen in this community. A couple of weeks ago, some of our students organized a march. There are very strong feelings in the community, in our country right now, and I just want to say that I'm really proud that I live in a community where, first, that leadership of students is fostered and valued, that when they want to speak their mind, they have a safe place to do that, and that community members have a safe place to also kind of express just kind of the hurt that they feel right now on behalf of others in our community, and that we have leadership in the city and relationships with the city such that we can provide that safe space to allow people to peacefully share their feelings about something that's very important. So specifically, I want to thank the police department and the city for doing what they did to ensure that everybody was safe, and that everybody, was respectful. I've heard so many people thanking every police officer they saw along the way, and they were grateful to hear thank yous, and it was incredible. So I'm just proud, and I want to say that as me as citizen of this community. So thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Kevin?
I made a comment about this a couple months ago as we entered the pandemic, that I appreciated how important it is to invest in a leadership team to help that team develop, and then when you run into unplanned circumstances, you have that team, and then at that time it's time for those on the board to kind of step back and let them lead. And we see other organizations where kind of the opposite happens, where when uncertainty comes up, there's an eclipsing of the leadership in whatever organization it is, and chaos kind of ensues. And so I really appreciate that on a lot of fronts, on planning for the pandemic, the capability to do that, for investing in community conversations when there's not an immediate issue on the table. That is authentic. It builds trust. It shows that we genuinely want to be part of an overall conversation in what people's points of view are and so forth. It surrounds, it also includes our commitment to diversity and our development over the years of a genuine diversity council that brings in opinions. We've laughed together, we've celebrated together, we've cried together, we've debated, we've had arguments. We all feel a little bruised in that process. And so with what we're going through right now as a community, I'm encouraged that we as an organization are prepared and ready to continue that dialogue and not hurry and start one up. So I appreciate that. It also has, it relates to our work in our long-term financial planning. So many good things can happen when you have your focus be on development of leadership and continuity and long-term planning. And so there's so many things happening today. I think it's, instead of commenting on each and every one of those, it's more important to talk about our role as school board members at a time. We happen to be on a school board at a time in our nation that's full of emotion and potentially historic moments. And I think it's up to us to all stand up to it and realize we are in that moment. We can make changes. We are prepared to step up and do it. And most importantly, we have a team of administrators, teachers, staff, parents, community members who all have that focus and who are in it together, and we've been doing it. So I appreciate everybody's input, appreciate everybody's work, and I look forward to continuing that journey together.
Thanks, Kevin. Connie?
Got a theme going on here tonight. In an effort to not be too repetitious, I'm just appreciative to be a member of the community. Matt said it well. A lot of collaboration and consideration of others, making a lot of good happen in admittedly the face of some turmoil and uncertainty. So it's still a great place to be and to live.
Thanks, Connie. And I will just kind of echo, what has already been said to some extent. It's special to kind of see, I think back to a little over a year ago, maybe was it 2 years ago? I'm forgetting now, I'm blanking. We were in a place as a country where we were seeing, some student-led leadership and kind of the crucible forming around kids in high school and in college as our community was part of a nationwide discussion on how do we keep schools safe, how do we protect kids, when we have school shootings and things like that. And that was a discussion and a debate going on across the country, and it was going on in our community as well. And it was one of those times where the leadership of our students and the environment that fosters that leadership was on display, and seeing the creativity and just the organic kind of grassroots wheels turning and seeing, people on different sides of the spectrum of a problem that everybody agrees is a problem but can't necessarily agree on what the best way to solve it is, kind of come together and respectfully, voice their opinions and work around differences of opinion. And it was a time that kind of emphasized and highlighted the unique relationship that we have in Mason between our school, our city, our police force, and was sort of the ball rolling to a unique relationship that we have with our Mason police force. And that we're able to treat this part of our city, our school campus, as its own district, and build a relationship that's authentic and unique, really, that fosters a good relationship between our students and our police. And I think that was again on display a couple weeks ago, as Matt alluded to. And another item that was on display as part of that was, I think that there's been a emphasis, in the diversity and inclusive excellence rock that, has been a part of our district's, focus over the last couple years. The groundswell of support from the whole community. Again, there's problems that people universally, I think, agree are problems, but maybe not universally agree on how to address those and fix those. But what you see is a community coming together and recognizing pain that their neighbors are feeling. It's not folks coming from out of town or descending upon a rural suburb or suburb of Cincinnati. It's neighbors walking out their doors, down the sidewalk, and coming together and saying, hey, we feel the hurt as well. And there was a lot of listening and a lot of empathy going on that I think is very encouraging for our community in particular, but I would say beyond our community. I think our nation as well. And kudos to, again, our police department for fostering a safe environment to allow for people to peacefully come together and voice their concerns and protest. Kudos to the students who organized a very impressive gathering and outpouring of support. And I am also looking forward to continuing, as Kevin said, just this journey that does not have a finish line, doesn't have an end date. It's ongoing. It's work that we continuously commit to and we continuously do. But I think that we are as well situated as anybody can be in a time like this, when you have a conflict and you have some pain, and you're looking how can we heal and how can we be an example for other communities that are struggling with these issues as well. So with that, I've got nothing else to say other than a happy belated Father's Day to all those who got to celebrate over the weekend. I know I did. And with that, I will move to adjourn our meeting. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.